Hi everyone, welcome to WASD20. My name is Nate, and in this video we're going to be breaking down some of the major announcements out of Wizards of the Coast just yesterday. News related to an initiative they are calling One D&D. Now, I am mostly going to be commenting on the news that was released in a worldwide reveal trailer. It's about a 6.5 minute video, as well as some comments on the Unearthed Arcana, which is basically a play test for new rules changes coming to D&D, presumably with a new edition sometime soon. Now, let's talk about this name, One D&D. What they are not saying here is that this is going to be the name of the next edition. So I would not expect the next edition of D&D to be called One D&D, although they were kind of hinting at this idea that, forget the editions, this is just D&D. Anyway, they said for, I think, almost a year now that the next edition of D&D would not be a complete rewrite where they're scrapping 5th edition, but rather a rules revision. So a lot of people have called this, therefore, 5.5e, and it will be released in 2024, and we've known that for quite some time. But now we're getting our first hints of actual rule changes here in this playtest of Unearthed Arcana. Now, we'll get to the rules and all of that, but one thing that they're also talking about in this video quite a bit is diversity and inclusivity, and just trying to make it clearer that D&D is for everyone, whereas some people might have felt excluded in the past, maybe because it's mostly kind of medieval Europe flavor fantasy, which is honestly most fantasy since the popularity of Lord of the Rings in the 60s. Was it the 60s? I'm a bad Tolkien fan. Maybe it was earlier than that. The 50s, you fool! Anyway, we do see that in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they're really making a push to be more inclusive of different types of people, and you get adventures like the Radiant Citadel, which is actually, I think, a really good way to do it, by writing a series of adventures that are based on kind of non-traditional fantasy, real-world cultures. So I think that's really cool, and if you haven't checked this one out yet, it's a great little set of adventures if you're looking for something different. So that's one theme they're definitely hitting on. Another thing they talked about is this whole editions thing that I mentioned. Chris Perkins basically said that he feels we've gotten to a point where D&D 5th edition, they did it right. They included a lot of voices from the community, and they came up with an edition that has been really well received, and it has. He said it is stable and it is well loved. And then he said,
now that we have that, we are no longer in the position where we think of D&D as an edition. It's just D&D.
So again, I think that's kind of confusing, and if they're really going to be just calling this next edition Dungeons & Dragons, no more editions, I think that would indicate a little too much hubris on their part, because it's kind of saying that we know that many people have written different visions of D&D throughout the decades, but we are the only ones who have finally done it. We have created the perfect game. To be clear, I don't think that's what they're saying, but it's just kind of, I don't know. It's like, I think they're just trying to fight against this idea that maybe this is another edition and many more will follow, so why bother? I'm not really sure. Either way, I expect that this next edition will actually be called 5.5 edition, because I just think that's a clear representation of what it is. It is a rules revision of 5th edition D&D. They're going to be writing a series of new books for it, although all of these 5th edition adventures I have on the shelf will still be completely usable, completely compatible with whatever they make, according to what they're saying now. There will be a rewrite of the 3 core books from what I understand. So the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, and we might expect more rule books as well. But they are saying that there will be a rewrite of those and some rules revisions that keep the core of what people like about D&D 5th edition while tweaking some things. Now, before we get into the specifics of what we can see they've tweaked already, I want to talk about something I'm really excited about, which is digital D&D. So, Dungeons & Dragons officially purchased D&D Beyond, or I should say Wizards of the Coast officially purchased D&D Beyond, which is a digital tool set for Dungeons & Dragons. That's been very well received. I really like it. A lot of people love it. And that was back in April of 2022. So a lot of us have had our hopes up for a while that they would be, for example, when we buy a new D&D book, giving us a code for the digital version on D&D Beyond, which they haven't done. Now, it's only been a few months, but they are saying this definitely is coming. And to me, that's a no-brainer. I honestly just hope it doesn't take until 2024 with the new revision that we end up seeing that. I think they could do that much sooner, and I hope they will. But that linking of, digital and physical, I think that's a no-brainer. It makes a lot of sense. The other really exciting thing they talked about is a new virtual tabletop. Now, whether that will become a part of D&D Beyond or whether they'll take D&D Beyond and this new virtual tabletop, they're currently calling, I think, D&D Digital, and merge them into something new or just call it all D&D Digital. We don't know yet, but they showed some video of the virtual tabletop in action. It's in full 3D. It uses the Unreal Engine, and it looks like it has some pretty cool potential. The only thing I'm concerned about is that when you get a fully virtual 3D tabletop, it can kind of in some ways kill my imagination. We do start to feel like we're in a video game here, and it can actually limit the imagination, especially if they don't have a really robust and varied tool set for us to build with. And that's the other thing, is if they do have really varied and robust tool sets for us to build all kinds of things in, and our imagination has no limits whatsoever, we are unshackled, it's probably going to be really complicated and really hard to build in. So anyway, I will withhold judgment. It looks cool. I don't love the idea of 3D virtual tabletops. Personally, I kind of prefer something simpler. But one thing I think they are doing right here is they showed this tilt shift, which is basically a sort of lens on a camera in general, and you can replicate that illusion in post-production and all that. This idea of having a really kind of narrow focal length so that only certain things are in focus, and you often will up the saturation, and it can make it look more miniature in that way. And that I think is a good thing. I don't need to feel like I'm there in this virtual world. Sure, there's something cool about that, but I still want to have the feeling that I'm playing a tabletop role-playing game. And I like the idea that these are miniatures. So anyway, I can see tons of potential here, and it's kind of exciting. But I also have some concerns about it. So we'll see. Either way, it's about time they have their own official virtual tabletop that's just integrated seamlessly with all their stuff. I think this is a really good move. And it's also, to me, kind of a sign that they probably are doing very well and they've got lots of money to spend on this. Now, let's get into this new Unearthed Arcana. This is available for free. I'll put a link in the video description. It's a PDF, you can download it, and they're treating it as a playtest. They want people to try it out and give feedback. So, one of the biggest changes here, and this is all, by the way, related to character options at this time. It's about a 20-page PDF. But the biggest thing is, and we kind of knew this was coming, they are disassociating ability score bonuses from races. So you're no longer going to get ability score bonuses with your race. All dwarves get a +2 to Constitution or whatever it was. Now the ability score bonuses are actually going to come with backgrounds instead. Races do get some tweaks, and there are some new abilities and different things that certain races do get. There are also, we don't see all the races that have been released in this document, but we also do get one new one that I believe is replacing the Aasimar. The Aasimar are like this angelic celestial sort of race, and now we have what are called Ardlings. And Ardlings are still celestial, but in appearance, they can appear like any number of animals. They're banking on the popularity of the anthropomorphic races. The Kenku, the Tabaxi, Dragonborn, etc. Now, they still have Dragonborn, but anyway, I'm not sure what this means for the inclusion of like Tabaxi, but the Ardlings seem cool. Seems like a decent change. I think that some people might not like the idea of just any sort of animal person walking around in their world. But overall, I think that is going to be a popular move. So you can see here with backgrounds, for example, the Acolyte gets a +2 to Wisdom and a +1 to Intelligence. Let's see. The Criminal gets a +2 to Dexterity and +1 to Intelligence, and so on and so forth. There are a couple of new backgrounds here, and we don't get all the same backgrounds that we do in the 5th edition Player's Handbook at this time. But there are things like, for example, Guide, Farmer, and a couple other new ones. You'll also notice that the backgrounds come with a language now and a feat. So they're reworking feats, and feats are now going to be by level. So with your background, you will get a first level feat. So they're going to be categorizing all feats by level is what that seems to indicate. In this document, we only get all of the first level feats that come with the backgrounds they're giving us here. There might be some new ones. I'm honestly not super familiar with all the feats in 5th edition, but there's definitely a lot of them that I recognize. There are some changes to what they're calling the D20 test. This is now going to be what they use as a term to describe ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. And there are some changes to rolling a 1 and 20 as well. Roll a 20, one of the bigger changes is when you roll a 20, yes, that's a critical success. You automatically succeed, but you also gain 1 inspiration. Now, they're still saying that inspiration doesn't stack, and they're not saying anything about inspiration being for good role playing or connecting with your character background, which I think is kind of a shame. Obviously, a lot of us are still going to do that, but you do get inspiration for, doing something that is particularly heroic or amusing, or by rolling a 20. There's some changes to some of the conditions and unarmed strikes, and yeah, just a bunch of other stuff. And another big change is they're moving away from spell lists by class. And in this document, they do have spell lists in 3 categories. You've got arcane spells, divine spells, and primal spells. I think the implication being there that, primal spells are going to be for druids and rangers, stuff like that. Divine spells are going to be for clerics, paladins, probably, maybe warlocks, I don't remember. And then arcane spells are going to be for wizards, sorcerers, bards, etc. I'm not listing all the classes, I realize, but you get the idea. So overall, I think that's probably a positive change. I don't think we necessarily need each class to have their own spell list, and this seems to indicate that that will be going away. So there's a lot more we could talk about in this document, but I wanted to give kind of a brief overview of some of the things that stuck out to me, none of which seem all that crazy, and a lot of which they've been hinting at for a while, so many of us are not surprised. Anyway, it was a big day for D&D 5th edition, and I would love to hear what you think about any of the stuff I've talked about down in the comments below. So please, let me know. I want to thank the WASD 20 patrons for supporting the channel, and if you want to join with them, you get access to some pretty cool rewards. Things like weekly live map drawing streams with me, occasional behind the scenes videos, and stuff like that. So go check it all out over at patreon.com/WASD20. I'll also put some links to D&D products down in the video description. Those are affiliate links to DriveThruRPG, Absolute Tabletop, and Amazon.com. So buying your RPG goodies through those links is a great way to support the channel at no extra cost to you. I do get a small commission from every sale. I think that's about it for this one, everybody. Take care. You'll see me again very soon.